Hello again, everyone. Thank you for bearing with me as I get set up in the back end here. Welcome to Time Management, maximizing your personal productivity. I will be sharing my screen. One second. Great. If this is the first time you are joining our COA session, we ask for one piece of feedback if you can at the end of the session, one for myself as the moderator and one for Mr. Todd. And if you have not downloaded the feedback app as yet, we ask that you open up your phone. You can go to the Android or the App Store, open up your camera on your phone, and you can scan the QR code, and it'll take you right there. And you should be able to download and log in as you did previously when you sign up for the class. If you have any issues or trouble logging in, you could email our team behind the scenes, coa@nextrum.com, and they will be able to assist you and getting you a username and password. Hello, Todd. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Raleigh. How are you? Let me know when I could share my screen.
Sure. We can test sharing now. I will stop sharing and you can share, and then I will take back sharing rights and I'll intro you at 3 p.m. and you could take it from there.
Great. Let's get the party started here.
Okay, Todd, you can share your screen now.
Thank you.
Looks good.
Great. Hey, Janice, how are you?
Doing good. Good to see you, Todd.
Great.
Hello, everybody.
Janice just did an amazing COA webinar last week on banishing burnout based on her banishing burnout toolkit. So thanks for being with us today. One of the best ways to banish burnout is to manage your time more effectively. So that's one of the things we'll be talking about today. If you want to put in the chat box where you're dialing in from, music is too loud, I'm sorry, I've lost my hearing from listening to The Clash for all those years, so it's too loud, I'll lower it. Or you can turn your volume down, so that's the other option. But I will lower it on my end. If you want to put in the chat box where you're coming from, that would be great to hear. Mix of people all over the world.
As we wait for other attendees to join, I do want to mention that this session is recorded, so you should be able to view the recording of this session and other COA recordings by 12 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow on our COA side.
Great. And this is my fourth COA webinar, so if you want to see any of my other ones on my passion skill matrix, on visual thinking, just visit the COA website and check them out. There's 3 already, and this will be my 4th.
I'm gonna send a request in the chat to just lower the music a little bit. I think
Sure.
it's funneling over the sound.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Usually people love my music, but I'm happy to lower it or shut it off. That's usually the thing that people comment on in their feedback, but okay. So yeah, I'm getting some love the music, hate the music. So you can't please everyone all the time, right? But it eliminates that awkward silence that happens in meetings and in webinars. And pumps up the energy a little bit. It shows that my microphone is good. I just got a new microphone, so if it's too loud, that might be one of the reasons why. This one is very sensitive.
Todd, I think that's what it is. I feel like it's peaking. So when you speak, it's just going over to a little bit of hissing over the...
Okay, I'll lower it. I'll lower it. We've got 7 more minutes, so we'll just relax until then.
About 6 minutes before we started. Welcome everyone. People are still coming in. One reminder is the session is being recorded, and Todd has a couple of other sessions on our COA site, so be sure to check it out. The site recording, this recording in particular, will be up on the site live by tomorrow lunchtime, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If this is the first time you guys are joining us, we ask that you leave feedback. This is only ask that we ask from you for joining our COA session. If you haven't already downloaded the feedback app, we ask that you do so and be able to sign in and leave feedback for myself as the moderator and also Todd.
I'm switching to my time management mix.
Minutes, 525,000 moments, oh dear. 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year? In daylights, in sunsets, in midnights, in cups of coffee, in inches, in miles, and laughter and strife. In 525,600 minutes. How do you measure a year in the life? How about
Is the music still too loud? I have it way away from my mic.
But I'm gonna kick you out from sharing just for a second. Let me just share my screen so people can download the feedback app. Then I'll intro you and you can continue sharing. Is that okay?
Got it.
Thank you so much. Again, everyone, this would be the link to download the feedback app. If you haven't done so already, you can just open up your phone, whether it be an Android or an App Store phone, scan the QR code, and it'll take you directly to our Feedback Labs app, where you will be able to download and log in to leave feedback for us. At the end, we will be demoing how to leave feedback from my phone. So if this is the first time you have joined us and you don't know how to leave feedback, don't worry. We will get that going for you guys.
I did this because the neighbors were seeing a trouble with the water.
Okay, ask if you can please stay muted. Okay, we're 1 minute to 3. I'm gonna intro Todd. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for doing this presentation for us, Todd. Todd is the CEO and co-founder of Big Blue Gumball, a New York City-based consulting firm specializing in leadership development, public speaking, and executive coaching. He's also a 3-time award-winning adjunct professor and leadership at NYU School of Professional Division on programs in business. So welcome, Todd, and I'll turn it over to you today. It's great to have you back.
Great, thank you. I'm having a little, hold on a second. Okay, got it. Is my screen being shared? Let me see how I got bumped out before.
Not yet, no. It was being shared a second ago.
Okay, so that whole switch over bumped me off, so I need to get back on there, sorry. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I got bumped off the screen share.
That's fine, Todd. I think you should be able to share yourself again in Zoom without any issues.
All right, here we go. All right, so let's get started. So welcome to, again, I mentioned before, this is my 4th COA webinar. Always happy to be back here and going global. So today's about time management and maximizing your personal productivity. So one of the things we want to do is metaphorically pull back the curtain, and I'm going to reveal to you some of my secrets of time management. Some of the things I'll be talking about today are best practices and not my original content, and other things are some of my own original models. So one of the secrets of success with time management is about how do we get more done in less time, but it's not just about getting more done, it's about getting the right things done. So as we talk about, start thinking about like, what's the difference between being efficient and being effective? So we want to be both efficient and effective, but sometimes we need to prioritize, right? So that's one of the things that we'll be talking about today. How do we set our priorities? So I played the song at the beginning. So what does 525,600 represent? Those of you who know the song, it represents what? If you want to put it in the chat box. Just open my chat. A year, right? So that's how many minutes we have in a year. So doesn't it seem like we all have the same number of minutes, and yet doesn't it seem like some people get so much more done with those minutes than others? So if you think about this many minutes in a year, and it's from the musical Rent, if you've never seen it, this many minutes of the year works out to this many hours per year, which works to about 2,000 work hours per year. So if you think about it, that is the number of working a 40-hour week with a couple of weeks vacation. That's about how many hours we're working every single year. So one of the things that you want to think about is, how are you spending those hours, right? Do you feel like you're getting the most out of them? Are you maximizing the time that you're putting in? So one is, how are you spending those hours? And the other question is, how should you be spending those hours, right? So picture and one of the things I'll be talking about, and those of you who've seen my webinars before, I'm all about visual thinking and visual communication. So there will not be a lot of bullet point text in my slides. You'll see a lot of visuals. So one of them is, if you think about your 24 hours a day as a pie, right? Ideally, the average tends to be, we spend about 8 hours of work, around 8 hours of sleep, if you're lucky. I very rarely get that, maybe on the weekend, but not during the week. And then 8 hours of you time, right? So if you think about that, for me, this is my breakout. So everyone has a different proportion. I tend to work around 12 hours a day. I'm lucky if I get 6 hours of sleep and around 6 hours of you time. But I think one of the things that we'll find is, during the pandemic, how many people are feeling like this? We're working from home. We feel like we're working 23 hours a day with no off switch, and maybe getting an hour of sleep if you're lucky. So just for those who don't know me, a little bit about me, just 2 minutes on my background. So my name is Todd Churches. My company is called Big Blue Gumball. We do management, leadership, consulting, training, and coaching, public speaking, etc. And the name of my company is a metaphor. It represents the world. So to us, the world is like a big blue gumball, however you want to take that. And our mission is to make the world a better place, one leader at a time. And to us, everyone is a leader. Even if you're not a manager, regardless of your title or position, you still need to lead yourself. You still need to lead your life, and you still need to lead other people. You need to lead in order to succeed, is one of my phrases that I always use. In addition to running my company, Big Blue Gumball, here in New York, I'm also an adjunct professor of leadership at NYU and Columbia, where I teach leadership in a variety of different master's programs. I did my first TEDx talk last year, if you want to check it out. And my first book just came out back in May, published by Simon & Schuster. Visual leadership is all about using visual thinking, metaphor, analogy, and storytelling to manage and to lead, both at work and in life. So with that, let's turn the page and let's get started and focus now on time management and personal productivity, right? So what I'd like to do right now, let's start with just do a little self-assessment. And again, we're trying to make this as interactive as we can, regardless of the fact that we have over almost 1,000 people on this call. So if you would, think about this question. What are some of the key time management and personal productivity challenges that you're currently facing? Just type them into the chat box and let's get a sense of what some of the issues you are. I see kids, I see, I'm not going to read them out loud. So let's just take a look at what's going by the chat box. A lot of common themes. Procrastination, kids, pets, distractions, prioritization. Procrastination is a key one. Concentration and focus. Negativity, being tired, being bored. Especially for those of us, working from home for the past 8 months. It's a challenge. It's a different time management challenge than we used to have. Some of us used to commute. If you were used to commuting for an hour or two every day, all of a sudden you have that time back. You're not commuting. The flip side of that is you need to be disciplined in terms of how you spend your time and when you get your work done. A very common theme is for managers. How do you manage people remotely without micromanaging? All right. Some managers expect their people to be sitting in front of their computer from 9 to 5 every day. Is that realistic? And is that productive in this day and age? Is it okay if people get their work done at midnight, if they're taking care of their kids during the day or doing something else, right? So how we think about time has really been impacted over these last 8 months due to the pandemic. I'm seeing some people feel micromanaged. A lot of people feel burnt out, right? So we see a lot of these key themes in here, losing track of time, and they're still coming in. So this is great. So we're going to be talking about as many of these things as we can. So one of the most common challenges that I saw mentioned is managing projects, right? Whether it's our own projects or projects for our companies, right? A project is assigned and we have a project deadline. So in an ideal world, if you think about it, the blue represents in the real world, in an ideal world, getting things done at a leisurely pace. And ideally, you finish things and you get to just relax. How often does that happen, right? So more likely is this happening. We're procrastinating, and then we have this mad scramble at the end to get things done and to meet those deadlines. So a big part of not doing this is being more focused, being more deadline driven, being more disciplined in how we spend our time. Nike said, just do it. And other people say procrastination, just do it later, right? So if we have that mindset, oh, I just do it later, I'll get it when I get around to it. Sometimes we never get around to it, right? Or we get around to it at the very last minute. Oscar Wilde once said, I never put off till tomorrow what I can do the day after, right? So if that's our mindset, it's very challenging to get things done. So one of the biggest challenges that leads to procrastination is perfectionism. So often we wait till things are perfect, the perfect time, or until we have all the information. When do we have all the information? Never, right? So at what point do we have enough information to make informed, intelligent decisions? That's one of the things that we need to think about, is how much research do we do before making a decision, before acting, and before shipping. I was just talking to a friend of mine who was writing his first book, and he was saying, when are you done? You're never really done. You're never really done, right? You're still working on things until you finally say, you know what, I'm done at this point. So a lot of times we're procrastinating and waiting for things to be perfect. But the flip side of that is Seth Godin, the marketing guru, says we need to ship. We need to reach a point where we say, you know what, I need to get this out the door and put it out there into the world. John Wooden, the basketball coach from UCLA, said, if you don't have time to do it right, when will you have the time to do it over? And I love that quote, because so often we, again, are waiting for things to be perfect, or we're trying so hard to get it perfect, or we ship things too soon. The flip side of that, we ship things too soon, and then we don't have time to do it over, and we're not happy with the result. So he also said, be quick, but don't hurry. So with that, I'm going to slow it down a little bit. And I wanted to ask you this question. We all currently need to manage our own time and productivity. What are some of the productivity tools or methods or philosophies that you follow? So if you would, put it in the chat box and let's see what are some of the things that you use. Eat That Frog. I see Getting Things Done by David Allen. That's a classic. Panic. Yeah, sometimes panic is a big motivator. I saw the Pomodoro method. We're going to be talking about that in a minute. Alarms and habits and lists and calendars. These are great. Writing down our goals. See, a lot of checklists. The 2-minute rule is a good one. Prioritizing, time blocking. These are great. So here's the thing. There are so many different methods, right? We only have 45 minutes total today, right? There's so many different ways of getting things done, of prioritizing, of trying to be productive. We can't possibly cover them all. So what I'd like to do today is introduce you to 6 of my favorite time management techniques, tools, tips, and techniques that help me be productive. I also do a 3-hour version of this, and I also do a full day version of this where I have, like 100 tips, right? But today, sometimes less is more, right? So instead of whipping through 50 different tips, I want to just focus on 6 of the ones that I find most effective. And these are some of the ones that some of you mentioned. So number 1, and a few of you mentioned these, to-do lists or checklists, calendar, and time log. These are the things that most of us do, but we don't always do them effectively, right? So you have a to-do list, you make the list of here are the things I need to do, but what often happens is we have interruptions and distractions, and we spend all day on email or LinkedIn or Facebook, and we get nothing done, right? So in addition to the checklist, we need to think about when things need to be done. What are our deadlines? What are the milestones, right? And it's such a great feeling, isn't it, to cross something off or check something off the list? That's ideally what we want to do, is be able to get things done so we could check them off the list. So this is a classic book written by Atul Gawande. He's a surgeon who talks about how using a checklist in the emergency room and in the operating rooms, basically, literally saves lives, right? How to get things right. You would think, oh, surgeons know what they're doing. But if you don't have a checklist, you skip steps. You forget to check certain things. And also a checklist or a communication tool. You may have your own checklist in your own mind, but how do you communicate that checklist to other people so that you're all on the same page? And when you're working in teams, that is very important, right? So one of the most important checklists for any team, and this is one of my mantras that I use all the time. I teach it in all my classes. It is so simple and so obvious, and yet we don't do it. At the end of every conversation or every meeting, make sure you have the answers to these 3 questions. Who is doing what by when? Who is doing what by when? So at the end of a meeting, even if I go to the supermarket with my wife, right? I'll say, I will get these things, you'll get these things, and I'll meet you at the cash register in 15 minutes, right? Who, we know who is doing what, and we know by when we're doing it, right? If you end a conversation or end a meeting and you don't know the who's doing what by when, ask these questions, clarify it. If it's your boss, if it's teammates, this is so important. And what's amazing is it's so simple and obvious, and yet so many people don't do this, right? And this is where the ball drops in between people, or people duplicate efforts. Oh, I thought I was doing that. No, I thought I was doing it. And then you realize that both people did the same thing. And we have duplication of effort. So this one simple thing, who's doing what by when, can really not only help you manage your time more effectively, but to coordinate when you're managing your time when it involves other people. So that's category number 1, is using a checklist and also your calendar. We all have different ways of calendaring, but whether it's digital, whether it's manual, getting things down. I actually use, I'm going to show it right here. I have my digital calendar, but I also have my paper calendar. I like to visualize it. I like to cross things off and check things off. I like to be able to see my entire month at a glance on a piece of paper. So the good thing about this, it never crashes. It never goes down and nothing ever slips off. The downside, there's no alarms on here. So that's why I used to need to do it in combination. But that's a good tip to keep in mind, is have a backup plan, a backup strategy. So if you lose information, you could synchronize things between a paper calendar or a paper checklist and your digital. And the third one of the top one is time tracking. Has anyone ever used a time log? Just put in the chat box if you've ever tracked your time. What's the purpose of keeping a time log? What would you say? A lot of people use it for billing clients. Like if you're a lawyer and you have billable hours, what's really interesting is you keep your calendar, which is what you plan to do. But when you keep a time log and you actually log what you actually did, there's very often a disconnect between what you planned and how you actually spent your time. So the value and the power of a time log is that you can see if how you planned your time and how you actually did are in sync with one another. And if not, then you can make adjustments for going forward. So that's what I would recommend, is keep a time log for a week or 2, and then look at it and then see. You realize how much time is wasted, how often we spend an hour in a meeting that could have been a half hour, or something that could have been a 5-minute phone call turned into a 1-hour meeting. And we don't realize it until we actually track things and look back. Peter Drucker, the management guru, said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I'm a big fan of that quote, and we'll talk more about that later, is if we don't manage our time, it's very hard to manage it because we don't know where we're spending our time. And here's that quote from Peter Drucker: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So let's move on to tip number 2. I call this the 3 Bs. How many people have ever used any of these 3 Bs? Put it in the chat box if you've ever used any of these. Or first, define it. What do we mean by each of these? I see a few bookendings, a few blockings. Great, so let's define each one at a time. All right, so now I'm going to slow it down. If you think about bookends on a shelf, right, a bookend from A to Z, you have a bookend on one end, a bookend on the other. To bookend your day, your week, your month, or your year, you want to block out time at the beginning and the end. So one of my suggestions is, let's use a real life example. Let's say you work from 9 to 5. You can bookend your day by blocking out, say, from 8 to 9 for planning out your day and thinking through your day and meditating or just envisioning, using your visual thinking, envisioning how you're spending your day. And at the end of the day, let's say you work not from 9 to 5, you can use from 5 to 5:30 or 6 to look back at the end of the day on how you spent your day, what you got done, what you didn't get done, what you need to do the next day. So bookending is very powerful. And you can do the same thing at the beginning and end of a week. You could do it on Sunday night, or you could do it Monday morning, you could do it Friday afternoon or Saturday morning. But think about that. Use the beginning and ends of your weeks, your months, and your years to really think through planning ahead and looking backward. So that's tip number one. That's what bookending is all about. The second B is blocking. If we don't block out time for certain things, whether it's just me time or for reading or for strategic planning, it's not going to get done. And especially if you have a calendar where other people can put things on your calendar, before you realize it, your whole week fills up and you get none of your own stuff done. So that's one of the second B is to block out time for yourself and actually schedule a meeting with yourself where you actually get some stuff done. Because without that, you just never get around to it, or your calendar just gets so filled up that you don't get anything done. And the third one is batching. Any guesses what batching means? Look in the chat box, see if anyone uses batching. Right, doing all of a single task at one time. So for example, what often happens, let's say we're in the middle of working on something and emails come in and we hear chime, 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 or LinkedIn or Facebook and all those, we hear the chimes going off. And what if it's almost like being a dog with Pavlov's dog? Every time the bell rings, we stop what we're doing and go to do something else, we get distracted. How do we get our work done if we're stopping for every email, every text, every notification that comes in? So one of the suggestions is, if you can, turn those things off, turn off those alarms, but batch those things together. You can allocate certain times of your day to responding to emails, to checking Facebook, to going on LinkedIn. If you batch them together, it's like paying bills. You could pay a bill every single time a bill comes in, whether electronically or through the mail, or you put all your bills together and you sit down with your checkbook, or you sit down with Zelle or however you pay your bills, doing it online, and you knock them all out at one time. So those are the 3 Bs. You bookend things, you block out time for things, and you batch like things together. If you do these 3 things, you find yourself being so much more efficient and so much more effective, because it's a great way to manage your time. And again, you can also measure your time, and you can see how much time you're spending on all these things when you group things together. So those are my 3 Bs. So I want to talk to you about number 3. A few people mentioned this, the Pomodoro technique. Who can explain what the Pomodoro technique is in a single sentence or two? Yes, T just said it. 25 minutes of work and 5-minute break. So 25 to 5. Basically, they are sprints. 25-5 method. Now, what does this mean? For every half hour of your day, so start to block out, think of your time in 30-minute increments. Work for 25 minutes straight. Shut off everything. Just focus, respond to things, get things done for 25 minutes. And then when the bell goes off, take 5 minutes, take a break. You can stretch, you can get some air, you can use the restroom, you can get a refreshment. Use that 5 minutes of me time. And then you go back and you do it again for another 30 minutes, 25 and 5. Who knows why it's called the Pomodoro technique? What is a Pomodoro? John Cook set a kitchen timer. It's great that your name is Cook and you know that it's a kitchen timer, John. Yes, a Pomodoro is a tomato, right? So the guy who invented this had a kitchen timer that in his kitchen that was shaped like a tomato. So that's why he named it. So Pomodoro sounds so exotic, like it was invented in Italy or by some Italian explorer. It's literally named after his tomato kitchen timer. And yet it's one of the most famous and simple time management techniques in the world. So the key thing here is it doesn't have to be 25 and 5. It could be, you could work an hour. You could work 50 minutes straight and then block off 10 minutes. But the key thing is it reminds us to set that timer, to take a break, take a pause. We can't work 8 hours straight without just a mental break. We're on cognitive load. We never get to respond to our emails if we're focused on a project, or if we're on email all day, we never get any work done on our project. So this is a great way. So whatever works for you. And I just want to hit the pause button for a second and say that with all these models, these tools, tips, and techniques, if it doesn't work for you, don't discount it and discard it. Don't throw it out. Make it work for you. Come up with your own version, right? You could, if let's say you have a kitchen timer that looks like a chicken, you might call it your chicken technique or whatever your timer is. It doesn't really matter. You could use an alarm on your phone, right? It doesn't have to be a kitchen timer. So that's the thing. Whatever works for you based on your job and what you do and where you work and the requirements. So any of the things we're recommending today, these are best practices that work for me. They're time tested. No pun intended. But these are things I found work for me. But if they don't work for you, then modify them so that they do work for you, or come up with your own techniques. Because again, if you just wing it, you can always do the same thing you've always done, and you're not gonna be able to be more efficient and more effective. So that's the key thing from today, is being more aware of, there are so many time management techniques out there. You don't have to use all of them, but find some of them that resonate with you and that actually work for you. So let's talk about number 4 of 6. This is my own original model that I call the 5 levels of proactivity. What do we mean by proactivity? Stephen Covey in his 7 habits, habit number 1 is be proactive. What does it mean to be proactive? Who could define that in the chat box? What does proactivity mean? Thinking ahead and preparing, planning ahead. So I see a lot of the word ahead, right? So proactive. So to be active is to do something. To be proactive is to be ahead, to think ahead, to plan ahead, to do ahead, to take initiative, as a number of people are saying. So let me introduce my model to you. So we're going to come across certain moments of truth along our journey. So I'm going to slow it down and let's just introduce this. There are 5 levels of proactivity. Level 1 is inactive. Let's say something happens. You could choose just to ignore it and not respond. When you do that, you're inactive. Sometimes problems go away by themselves. Sometimes emails answer themselves. Sometimes people, have you ever had someone email you and ask you for something and you spend a half hour researching it and you get back to them and they're like, oh, never mind, right? That's happened to me a number of times, right? So inactive is a strategy. Sometimes you say, you know what, I'm going to ignore this one and just let it pass. Again, I'm not talking about if it's from a boss or from a client. I'm just saying sometimes you could just say, you know what, I'm not going to deal with that right now. So in terms of your level of proactivity, you're inactive. You don't do anything. Next level up is being reactive. Something happens, you respond. Something happens, you respond. So the good thing is you are responding. The flip side of that is you're always a step behind. So it's almost like a staircase where you are below that line, right? So it's great. It's great that you responded. It's great that you're reactive. But what very often happens is that things pile up. And if you're reactive too often for too long a time, it's not sustainable because those things pile up to the point where you actually, some things drop off the list because you didn't get around to them, or you have so many things to do that you didn't anticipate and that you didn't plan for, that you start to disappoint people because you can't respond to them in a timely fashion. So being reactive is fine. It's good. It's better than being inactive and not responding at all. But again, we're a step behind. When we're active at level 3, we are keeping up in real time. We're in the moment. We're responding in real time. No one's waiting for us. There's no lag. We're not caught off guard. We're prepared. So that's level 3, is being active. You're driving things, people are responding, and things are happening in real time. Proactive is the flip side of reactive. When you're proactive, you're not a step behind and you're not working just in real time, but you're a step ahead. So you're anticipating, you're thinking, what might my boss need? What might I need? What might this client need? So when you plan ahead, you actually are almost like a mind reader. You send someone to something, say, oh, he's just going to ask you that, and you already sent it to me, right? The power and the value of being proactive is it makes you look responsible. It makes you look accountable. It shows that you're thinking. It shows that you care, right? How great is it when you have a customer service person who anticipates what you need? We just got a dog, a puppy last week, and the person we got it from just called my wife yesterday and say, how's everything going? So before my wife even had to call her and give her an update or ask her some questions, they reached out to us and said, how's your puppy doing? Is she adapting? Does she need anything? Do you have any questions about anything? That little bit of proactivity sends a message of care, accountability, and it goes a long way. So that's what I would suggest is look for opportunities to think and act a step ahead of people. And that really becomes part of your brand, your reputation is so-and-so is always on top of things. Not only on top of things, but stays ahead of things. What would you guess level 5 is? Super proactive. And we'll get to questions later. I see it's hard for me to keep up with the chat box while I'm presenting, but hopefully Raul will capture some of those questions and we'll get to them towards the end of today. What is super proactive? What would you say? So strategic planning, as Kay Foreman said. What else? Time traveler, being in the zone. What else? Creating a need and then filling it. Long-term future planning. Yeah, to me, if proactive is staying a step or two ahead, thinking and being super proactive is being 5 or 10 or more steps ahead. It's anticipating things down the road. It's saying what might be needed, what questions might be asked, right? So right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? We're trying to work, we're trying to function. But when we think about the phrase, the future of work, one of the common conversations I'm having with my coaching clients and in my NYU and Columbia graduate classes is, what's the future of work? What does it look like beyond the pandemic? What's going to happen? Are the needs going to be next March, next April, next time this year, right? What's going to change and go back to the way it used to be? What are the things that are changed forever and not going back at all, right? So we really need to be super proactive in terms of planning and strategizing so that we're not caught off guard, so that we're not caught like a deer in the headlights. So being super proactive, what does that mean in your own life? What are the things that you're thinking about now? Sometimes some of us are just reacting or just barely keeping up. But how can you plan and think and anticipate what might be needed 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the road? And again, we've never had a situation like this with this pandemic. So this has changed everything. So the old ways of doing things no longer matter. We can learn from them. We can figure out what might change, what might be needed. But for many of us, we simply don't know. We're living in what is called a VUCA world. Who knows what VUCA stands for? VUCA. Because we're actually living in a hyper VUCA world now. It's more VUCA than ever. So who knows what VUCA stands for? Volatile is the first, the U. Uncertain, chaotic or complex. And the A, ambiguous. Nicely done. So that was teamwork. Together, we all got it, right? So if we're living in a world that's VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, what's the opposite of VUCA, right? The opposite of volatile is calm. Opposite of uncertain is certain. The opposite of complex is simple, and the opposite of ambiguous is clear, right? So as leaders and as people, how can we find some simplicity, some clarity, some certainty, and some calmness in this chaotic world that we're all dealing with and living in right now, both in terms of the pandemic, in terms of social issues, in terms of the economy, right? So there are so many unknowns that it is really hard to figure out what to do and what we need to do to prepare for the future. So, but if we're proactive and super proactive, we will not be blindsided. We won't be caught like a deer in the headlights, and we'll be able to prepare for the future, whether it's with our teams or organizations or just for ourselves. So that's the whole idea behind the 5 levels of proactivity. It'll help to guide you through at any moment at what level of proactivity am I currently acting. And if you want more on this is actually a chapter in my book. But if you go to my LinkedIn page, you can actually find it as one of my blog posts, and you can read this excerpt for free if you want to learn more about what the 5 levels of proactivity model is with a couple of real life examples. So let's go to number 5. This one's really simple and quick. What I call black sock decision making, and I deal in visual metaphors. Any guesses what black sock decision making might be? Let's see if anyone could guess this. Easy. What makes it easy? Simplifying, taking away choice. Exactly. Here's the real life story. I used to travel a lot on business, and I always had to match my socks to my suits and my ties. It's been a half hour just picking out socks. And then I realized that half hour of picking out socks was such a waste of time because no one noticed and no one cared. I'd go all the way on a business trip and to different places and no one noticed my socks. So why did I spend a half hour picking out socks with the exact pattern that matched my suit and my tie, right? I went to Macy's and I bought like 18 pairs of black socks, and that's what I started wearing. So by eliminating one decision I needed to make think about all the time I saved just by not picking out socks or matching the socks in the laundry, right? That's a whole other thing. I won't even get into that, right? If we simplify, if we could commoditize certain things, if we could eliminate certain decisions, that frees our time and our minds up to invest that time and our brain cells into things that really matter, things that really pay off, right? So the idea, it's a metaphor. So I'm not talking just about socks. Sometimes socks are not only socks. I'm talking about what are some of the things in your life that you're making decisions about and spending a lot of time debating and discussing about that are just not the best use of our time. So think about time that you're wasting that you could get back to put to more productive uses. So that's what Black Sock decision making is about. It's also a chapter in my book, but also on my LinkedIn profile. If you just look at my articles, you'll find it there. And feel free to link in with me, by the way. I'll give you my contact information at the end, but I'd love to, anyone who wants, feel free to just link in with me, connect with me. Well, I'll tell you more about my website later and how you can connect with me and get on my list. But for right now, feel free to link in with me and I'm happy to connect with any of you. So Henry David Thoreau said, simplify, simplify, simplify. Although if he really wanted to simplify, he could have just said it once, right? So here's a perfect example of taking something that is so simple and let's make it even more simple. Einstein said, make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. And one of the things he meant by that is don't strip things of their subtleties, don't strip things of their nuance, right? We want to simplify things, but we want to simplify complexity, but that doesn't mean dumbing it down. That doesn't mean removing what makes it special, right? So simplifying, there's an art and a science to simplifying. And Da Vinci said that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So it is not easy to simplify complexity, but as a manager, as a leader, that's one of the most valuable and important things that we could do is to make the complex simple so that we can achieve understanding. And one of the ways to do that is to just say no. My new blog post that's coming out, I think tomorrow, is called, I looked at the calendar. One of my biggest problems is I am a yes person. I like to help people. I'm generous to a fault. I respond. If someone says, do you have an article on something, I'll spend a half hour researching it. If someone says, hey, can we talk one-on-one, I'll schedule time with them. And I realized I was spending so much time, not wasted time, but time I needed to spend on other things, other priorities, other deadlines, that I looked at the calendar and I said, I'm going to make this month a November. I'm going to just say no. So for this whole month of November, I've already said no to about 10 different things, a couple of podcasts, a few articles, a few meeting requests. I just can't do everything and get my work done. I was actually falling behind. So here I am, I teach time management, and yet I was wrestling to get things done within the time I had. And I figured out the best way to do that is just for a month, just to say no for right now. So maybe in December, maybe after the new year, but I started saying no to some things, and saying no actually was a huge weight off my back. And it removed so much stress and anxiety because it freed me up to focus on the things that I really need to. So that's one suggestion, is just say no in November and make this a November to remember. And if that works for you, do it in December as well. And it even rhymes. So there you go. My sixth tip, and let me just check on the time, it's 3:35. So I'm going to speed it up here just a little bit. How many people are familiar with SMART goals? It's become like a cliche, but not everyone uses it or uses it properly. I want to give you a real life example. SMART goals are when you set a goal. If you just say, I want to do something eventually, it never happens. But if you make a goal that is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound or time-focused, you're more likely to get it done and get the right things done. And you'll be both more efficient and more effective. And I want to give you a real life example. A few years ago, back in 2016, this is not me, this is not an actual picture, but I gained some weight. I couldn't button my pants. I had some bad blood tests and I needed to get back in shape. I'm 6'4", so this is not that terrible, but I got a bit of a stomach. So I hit 236 pounds. And my wife said to me, let's do a 30-day challenge. Let's try this, just change your diet. Let's exercise more and see what happens at the end of 30 days. So I let her be my nutritionist and plan my diet. I did the treadmill every single day. I lifted weights. I used SMART objectives. So I needed to reduce my stomach. I needed to lose 5 pounds. Was it achievable? Not sure. Was it relevant? Definitely. And time bound? Yes. We put a 30-day time frame in place. I didn't say change forever. I just said, let's see what we could do in 30 days, right? So I created for myself, because I have OCD and I'm very anal with things. And if it's not in the form, I don't get it done. So I created my own food and exercise log that I still keep 4 years later. I write down every single thing I eat, every single day, every single meal, and I log all my exercise, right? So by doing this, again, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So after 30 days, my goal was to lose 5 pounds. Guess what? I lost 10. I dropped from 236 to 226. My wife said, you know what? Let's do it again. Let's try it for 30 more days. Let's make it a 60-day challenge. Guess what happened? I lost 10 more pounds. I dropped to 216. And I said, you know what? I'm on such a roll. Let's keep it going. This 90-day challenge, I dropped down to 206. So I lost 30 pounds in 90 days just through the discipline. And believe me, it was not easy. I'm someone who used to eat a whole pizza and a pint of Haagen-Dazs in a half hour. So for me, this was not easy at all. But again, by being driven, by tracking these things and logging these things and setting specific metrics, I was able to do it. And here's the proof. This is the shirt that I used to fill out. And so you see, here's a real before and after. So since that time, I've continued it, and I have put back on, here's an example of my actual real life filled out, what it looks like when I was filling out my sheet. But again, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But if I had not tracked it, if I wasn't specific, measure this, set achievable goals, it was relevant to my life, and if I didn't have time frames, this never would have happened. So that's my tip. And thank you for all the compliments. So again, believe me, this was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And my weight now is around 205. So I gained a few pounds since then, because I hit 199 at one point, but that was not healthy for me. So, but to maintain it, I've had to maintain my time log. So I still do this 4 years later. And it's one of the best things I've ever done. And again, it's not easy, but most things that are worthwhile aren't. So these are 3 of the books that really helped me. And the video of this is going to be posted on the COA website. So anything you missed or anything you want to look back on, you can just watch the video. But these 3 books helped me to gain my willpower, change my habits, and realize my triggers, and really helped me to achieve that goal of weight loss and feeling healthier. And now I'm playing basketball again. And everything. So it's great. So that's the power of SMART goals. So I really encourage you to use it. And those are my 6 tips. So now you have these 6 tips to add to your toolbox, and hopefully it'll help you to be more productive. And in the time left, let's open up to some questions, and I'll close things out. So we're right on schedule.
Thank you so much, Todd. Before I begin with the question, can you go back to the SMART goals slide? And I do ask, you can put your question in. I will try to get to them as best as I can. There's going to be a lot of questions. It's going to be overflowing. On Todd, do you need me to read the questions out to you?
Yeah, because you just pick them out, because there's so many. I wouldn't even know where to start. There's so many great book recommendations. Thank you for all the book. I'm going to save the chat. Does everyone know how to save the chat box? If you click on the 3 box on the very bottom, it'll say save chat. So there's so many great conversations, and I like to read the chat afterwards. So just a tip there for everyone. If you want to save the chat box, it's easy for you to do.
Yeah. One of the earlier questions, Todd, is can you explain the difference between proactive and super proactive with an example?
Sure. Being proactive, here's a real life example. Being proactive is thinking a step or 2 ahead, and super proactive is thinking way ahead, right? So if I'm being proactive, let's use just a real life example. Let's just use the diet and exercise thing. If I am proactive, I will map out what am I going to have this week? What am I going to eat? When am I going to exercise? I'll actually put that on my calendar. That's being proactive, because I'm planning ahead. If I'm super proactive, I may say, I may be thinking 3 months ahead. Do I want to run a marathon? Do I want to play softball again next season? I missed the season because of the pandemic. I usually play on 3 softball teams in Central Park. So one is thinking a step or 2 ahead, and super proactive is thinking 5 or more steps ahead. So it's just about the time frame. That's the simplest way to explain it. Super proactive has a longer time horizon. It's thinking strategically. For your career, proactive is thinking, what do I need to do today, tomorrow, and next week or next month, right? Super proactive is, where am I leading in my career? What do I see myself doing a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? That's a good career example of being proactive versus super proactive. It's just thinking, it's just a longer time horizon.
Thank you, Todd. Can you go back to the books again? There's some.
Sure.
And the next question is, how do you define achievable when it comes to SMART goals?
Achievable. Here's the thing with achievable. If you set goals that are too lofty, you're not going to achieve them, and it's demotivating. If you set goals that are too easy, it's also demotivating because you figure, all right, what's the big deal? So real life example, I set a goal of losing 5 pounds over the first month. If I had said I want to lose 30 pounds over the first month, that would not have been realistically achievable, right? I probably would have gotten depressed and defeated after a few days or after a few weeks, right? So it's setting goals that are realistically achievable. If I said I want to lose 1 pound this month, it's like, so what? I can have that pizza today. I can have that ice cream today because I could lose a pound easily, right? That's the thing about achievable. It needs to be a goal that is realistically doable based on reality and not a fantasy. So that's the key way I would distinguish between or define or explain what we mean when we say achievable. And some people use the word attainable. That's another word that sometimes people use for the A in SMART goals.
Thank you, Todd. I'm going to try to see if I can couple this question to 2-in-1. Is how do you move from inactive to active? And the other part of it is how do you keep super proactive from turning into worrying or stressing?
Turn into inactive into active. We need to be motivated. We need to feel like there's got to be some reason or purpose to it. If we're inactive, if we don't do something, it's usually either because we don't want to or we don't care. So we need to figure out, who's asking us? Is this something for ourselves or is this something for someone else? So it's so easy to become complacent or lazy. We need to think about why it's a very complex question. We could talk for an hour about it, but the simplest answer is if you're being inactive, if you're not doing anything, why? Is it because it doesn't matter? Is it too hard? Is it fear? Is it confidence? What is keeping you from going from inactive to active? And that's what I would say. In terms of super proactive, what was the other question? About the super proactive?
Yeah, so how do you keep from being super proactive? How do you keep super proactive from turning into worrying or stressing?
I don't know if you can keep it. It's when we talk about worry and stress, it's the unknown, it's the uncertainty, right? So we need to think about what that is. Being super proactive is basically going out on a limb, right? It's thinking about, why, if we're talking about being super proactive, we're talking about a longer time horizon. We could plan for it, but if we're worrying and stressing about what's going to happen 6 months from now, when we don't even know what's going to happen 6 months from now, especially now, again, keep going back to the pandemic because it's permeated all of our lives. We want to plan, we want to strategize, we want to anticipate. We need to envision, scenario planning, different possibilities. But fear and worry is just normal. Dale Carnegie has a classic book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. It was written, I don't know, probably 50 years ago, but it's a classic. And again, stress and worry are emotional reactions. And part of it is just, realizing that we can't worry and stress about things that are beyond our control, whether it's this election, whether it's the pandemic. There's some things within our control and some things that are not. I think just separating those two will help to alleviate some of that stress and worry.
Another question that came up here is how to effectively plan my day when in a crisis management line of work.
Yeah, there's a classic time management model that we didn't talk about today just because it takes about a half hour to teach. And that is, and I think a couple of people mentioned it, it's called the Eisenhower Matrix. It was popularized by Stephen Covey in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he wrote about it in his book, First Things First. But this 4-quadrant matrix where you have to think about what is urgent and what's important. If you're dealing in a crisis type of job, or if you're working in an emergency room, that's your job. That's part of your job, is to deal with crises and emergencies, right? So we need to basically be in the right job and the right fit, but we also have to find a way. Some people are great in a crisis. They actually are at their best selves when things get the worst and the scariest, and other people don't. So it really is about managing our own stress and worry. And when we're helping other people, a lot of times we forget about ourselves because we're trying to save or help someone else. So I think that's a big part of it. I mean, we could talk for hours. That's actually more of a Janice Litvin question, is how do we deal with stress, anxiety, burnout, et cetera. But this is more about managing your time and being more proactive. But yeah, definitely fear and anxiety and stress are a big part of managing our time. Because we think about all the time, this is one of Dale Carnegie's principles. Think about the things that you worried about, worst case scenarios. How often did those worst case scenarios happen, right? So you want to think about it, plan for it, try to prevent it from happening. But worst case, sometimes they do happen, but most often they don't. So a lot of times we get paralyzed by fear and indecision when, if we think things through or talk to someone. That's another thing too. Talking to someone really helps us to balance that and alleviate some of that fear and anxiety.
Todd, I'm going to make this our last question here since I know we're over the time, on the thoughts on how to manage the interruptions from your boss.
Yeah, again, that Stephen Covey time management matrix I mentioned, quadrant 3 is interruptions and distractions. One of the ways here's my quick tip. One of the ways to reduce interruptions and distractions is to anticipate them, go to the person and say, what will you be needing from me today? Is there anything I could do for you? When will you need that by? So if you're proactive and you reach out to them, then you can manage that around your time and your schedule. I didn't get a chance to finish up. I just lost my slides. I didn't get a chance to finish up my presentation. Can I get that back?
Yes, yes, definitely, Todd. Go for it. I'm going to stop sharing.
Right.
Didn't realize you had another slide there. My apologies.
Yeah, I need to just wrap up. So, sorry, let me just skip. Let me wrap up because I know we're running long. So you have these tips in your toolkit. Reach out to me anytime. Think about what your biggest takeaway from today was and what is one thing that you could do as a result of today. There are all these different books. Here are a few of my favorites. And again, just the best way to get anything that you missed is to watch this video when it goes up on the site next week. And my book is filled with tips on personal productivity and time management. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you go to my website and go to toddchurches.com/subscribe, you can download my top 52 book list. And last thing I want to leave with you is the story Rock, Pebbles, and Sand. It takes 30 seconds. So if you had a jar, and this is not my story, this is a classic story. If you had a jar and you filled it up with sand and pebbles, there's no room in that jar for the rocks. What does that have to do with anything? The sand and the pebbles represent the small stuff in life. The rocks represent the big and important things. If we fill our life and our time up with small, insignificant, trivial things like stresses and other things, we don't have time for the big, important things. And we don't fill our jar, our life up with those big, important things. So start with the rocks, prioritize, think about what's most important, and you'll have a happier, more successful life. And with that, everything else is just pebbles and sand. So thank you for being here today, and I appreciate all of the interactivity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Todd. It's very eye-opening. We're definitely going to use a lot of these tips and better time manage ourselves. I do want to ask everyone before they leave to leave feedback for myself and Todd. Todd, I will stop sharing the screen, and I will share my screen, and I will demo how to leave feedback if this is the first time you have joined us and need to know how to leave feedback in the app. So we do appreciate your help. Just gonna go ahead and share my mobile phone, and I will demo how to leave feedback here. All right, hope everyone can see my screen. After you finish downloading the feedback app and you open it up to sign in, there's a big orange button at the bottom. You can just click on that, search for the name of the presenter. Today we're talking to Todd Churches, and you click on Mr. Todd. And then you select the meeting ID. For this one, we are using time management, maximizing your personal productivity. So you can click on that. And here you would leave a comment, what resonated with you, what you would have liked to see more. And we have a rating from 1 to 4, 1 being below expectations and 4 being far exceed expectations. You can select 1 through 4, whichever one you would like. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on Todd profile so you can see after, again, all these feedbacks are anonymous, so no one knows who's putting them in. Here you can see Todd is already receiving some feedbacks. There is a thumbs up button that you can click that is on the right side if you agree with the feedback, and there's a thumbs down button also that you can click. There is also a flag option if you feel that anything is inappropriate. For those who cannot download the app, I will stop sharing my screen and reshare back the QR code, show you how to do that. Hope everyone can see my screen. Great. So if you have an Android or you have an App Store device, you can just open up the camera and scan the QR code, and you would be able to populate the Feedback Labs app. You will be able to download it and log in as yourself. If you have any issues logging in, you can email our team behind the scenes who is working very hard to make sure that everyone is able to log in at coahelpdesk@nextgem.com. And that's where you would be able to log in and leave a feedback for myself as a moderator and also Todd Churches as the presenter. And yeah, thank you guys for joining. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming to our COA session. We do have a gratitude session that is starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be sure to check it out. You can go back to the COA webpage and be able to join that session. We have our YouTube link, the Zoom link emailed over to you. Todd, it's great to host you again.
Thank you, Rolf. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Great job.
To our audience on YouTube, we will stop web streaming now from YouTube. So thank you again for joining, and look out for another YouTube live session.